That right there, that's the start of the very last transmission ever picked up from the research vessel Oceanus back in 2019. Right after that, nothing but silence. The call itself is just baffling. It's panicked, confused, and it describes a situation that sounds completely impossible.
So today, we're cracking open a cold case file on one of the most bizarre maritime mysteries of the last century, the Ghost Island. It all kicks off with the ship, the Oceanus, found floating adrift, totally empty. And the only clue they find on board? A single photo of an island that, according to every map, every chart, every satellite image, well, it simply shouldn't exist.
Every good investigation has to start at the beginning, right? And to really get what happened to the Oceanus, we've got to rewind the clock, decades actually, to the very first piece of evidence in this whole strange affair. A warning that nobody listened to. Our story starts way back in 1973. A Japanese fishing boat, the Fukumaro, is out in the South Pacific, and its crew logs the coordinates of a small, uncharted island. Happens all the time, no big deal. But here's where it gets weird. A few weeks later, another ship passes through those exact same coordinates. Their report? Nothing. Just endless open ocean. And the fallout from this was brutal. The captain of the Fukumaro was publicly shamed, they accused him of being drunk on the job, and he was forced into a dishonorable retirement. The very first witness to this thing was silenced.
And those were his words until the day he died. He never backed down. To him, that island was as real as the ship under his feet, a place that just existed one minute and was gone the next. His testimony was the first page in our file, dismissed as fantasy at the time, but as we'll see, it laid the foundation for everything to come.
For about 14 years, the story of the Fukumaru was just that, a story, a sailor's yarn you tell over drinks. But then, the file gets a major, and I mean major update. We go from a fisherman's tale to cold, hard data, coming from one of the most powerful governments on the planet. Okay, so it's 1987. A US spy satellite, probably looking for submarines or something, takes a picture of a weird landmass at the exact same coordinates the Fukumaru had logged. But here's the kicker. As intelligence analysts start comparing images over the next 3 years, they confirm something that should be impossible. The island was moving. 40 miles. Now, I know that might not sound like a huge distance, but for an entire island, a chunk of rock and earth, to travel 40 miles in 3 years is, well, it's geologically insane. That's like waking up one morning and finding out Mount Everest decided to go for a stroll. This wasn't erosion, it wasn't a giant iceberg. This was something else. And what was the official reaction to this physics-defying discovery? Did they send out a fleet of scientists? Nope, they buried it. This leaked memo says it all, loud and clear. Phenomenon unexplained. Avoid area. They knew something was out there, something that broke all the rules, and the response was to hide it and just tell their own people to stay away.
And that brings us right back to 2019. After decades of official silence, a brilliant scientist named Dr. Elena Vance and her team on the Oceanus decide to do what the government wouldn't: find the truth. They were armed with the leaked files, new satellite data, and they were determined to solve the mystery of the moving island once and for all. This is where our case file takes a sharp turn from a scientific puzzle into, frankly, a horror story. As the Oceanus got close to the island's last known location, their high-tech, 21st century equipment just started dying. One by one, their connections to the modern world were just severed. I mean, just try to picture the scene on the bridge. The compasses weren't just a little off, they were spinning in circles, totally useless. The GPS screens, their digital maps of the world just blinked and went dark. And the radios, their only way to call for help, filled with this thick, impenetrable wall of static. In a matter of minutes, they were completely, terrifyingly alone. And then, the fear started to set in. This quote is from the ship's log, written by Sam, the team's marine biologist. It's the first time in the record we see this idea that they're not just dealing with a natural event. It felt like something sentient. The feeling of being watched out there in the middle of the vast, empty Pacific. Despite everything, they pushed on and made landfall. And what they found wasn't just a regular volcanic island. The shoreline was covered in these bizarre stone structures, circles, and patterns. In her notes, Dr. Vance said they were clearly intentional but not by human hands. The geometry was just off. It was alien. Something built this place, but it wasn't us. And this is where the investigation stops being about rocks and coordinates, and it becomes a tragedy. Because this abstract mystery of a moving island was about to claim a human life, and in the most horrifying way you can imagine.
These are the last words anyone ever heard Sam speak. He'd walked over to one of those strange stone circles, totally captivated by some markings he'd found. He calls out to Dr. Vance, his voice full of excitement and discovery. She and the rest of the team turn to look at what he's found.
In that single instant, the time it took to turn their heads, he was gone. Not collapsed, not dragged away, he just vanished. 1 second he was standing right there, and the next, there was nothing but empty space where he'd been. The crew's frantic search only made things more impossible. There was no sound, no scream, no sign of a struggle. His footprints led to the stone circle, and then they just stopped. None led away. There were no signs of an animal attack, no drag marks, no trace of him whatsoever. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was like he was just erased. Pure panic took over. As they scrambled back to their boat, they had this horrifying realization that the shoreline was getting farther away. The island itself was moving. In that chaos, Dr. Vance managed to snap one last photo over her shoulder. It wasn't until much later, when that photo was recovered, that they saw it. A faint, tall figure standing in the exact spot Sam had vanished from, just watching them leave. Okay, so let's step back. Let's put on our investigator hats. We have multiple sightings half a century apart, we have classified military data, a modern scientific expedition that ends in disaster, and evidence that just spits in the face of rational explanation. Let's see if we can piece this together. Well, the official theories just crumble as soon as you look at the evidence. The idea that it's a floating pumice raft from an undersea volcano? Okay, that's a decent guess, but pumice doesn't build intricate stone structures or make people disappear into thin air. A lost remnant of a continent like Lemuria? Maybe, but that doesn't explain how it traveled 2,000 miles against ocean currents. And time displacement? It's a cool idea, but it doesn't explain the final, terrifying piece of evidence we're about to see.
And that brings us to its latest known move. Between the 2019 incident and a satellite pass in 2023, the island traveled over 2,000 miles. This isn't geological drift. This is locomotion. This is intentional movement. It's behaving less like a piece of land and more like a predator.
Which brings us to the final exhibit in our case file. 6 months after the Oceanus was found adrift, Sam's waterproof camera washed up on a beach thousands of miles away. The memory card was almost totally fried, but they managed to recover one single bone-chilling photo. It seems to be a selfie. It shows a figure that looks like Sam standing inside one of those stone circles. But his eyes, they're just completely black, like voids. When you lay all the evidence out, from the ridiculed sea captain to the classified files to that horrifying final photograph, you're left with a conclusion that science just can't touch, but all the facts seem to be pointing to. This isn't some random natural anomaly. It's making choices. Which leads us to one last terrifying question. Because if the island is moving with a purpose, if it's hunting, then this case isn't cold at all. It's active. And you have to wonder, as it glides silently through our oceans, appearing and disappearing whenever it wants, where is it going to surface next, and who will be unfortunate enough to be there when it does?